single gunshot from just 7 inches away, a bullet piercing through Matt Gailie's upper lip and severing his brainstem in an instant. Jessica Lynn Alinsky, his girlfriend, tries to cover it up, staging a suicide with chilling precision.
911, where's emergency?
My boyfriend and I got into a fight. I don't know if he's killed himself.
You gotta calm down, honey. I can't hear you.
I don't know what happened. He's on the second. I think he's dead. Oh my God.
After years of investigation and a nail-biting trial, she's found guilty of third-degree murder. But did the jury uncover the whole truth, or is there more to this twisted tale than meets the eye? Matt Gailie, a corrections officer, had just finished his shift at the State Correctional Institution in Frackville. He arrives home, probably exhausted, thinking he's about to unwind after a long day. But less than an hour later, everything spirals into chaos. Matt and his girlfriend Jessica Lynn Alinsky get into a heated argument. We're not talking about a minor spat. This was intense enough to escalate into something tragic. Amid this argument, Jessica grabs a gun. Imagine the tension, the fear, the confusion, and then she fires, a single shot from less than 7 inches away. The bullet pierces Matt's upper lip and travels straight through to his brainstem, killing him almost instantly. It's horrifying to think about it, isn't it? Just like that, in a split second, a life is brutally taken. The aftermath is something of a nightmare. The bullet's trajectory is critical here. It's clear evidence of how close Jessica was when she pulled the trigger. The bullet entering through the upper lip and severing the brainstem. There's no coming back from that. The damage was immediate and fatal. Matt's body falls onto the couch lifeless. But the horror doesn't end there. Jessica, in a panic or perhaps in cold calculation, decides to manipulate the scene. She drags Matt's body from the couch to the living room floor. Imagine the effort, the desperation in these moments. She then plants a bank statement next to him and places the gun in his hand, trying to stage the scene as a suicide. It's gruesome and heartless, and here's the kicker. Someone with that kind of injury wouldn't have the capability to move around, let alone hold a gun. When the police first arrive, they're confronted with a messy, confusing scene. Early theories bounce around, but something just doesn't sit right. The gun placement, the position of the body, none of it adds up. This doesn't look like a typical suicide. They start gathering evidence, talking to witnesses, and piecing together the events of that night. This is where forensic pathologist Gary Ross comes into play. His testimony is crucial. Ross explains how the bullet's path into Matt's upper lip and the gun being found in his hand are immediate red flags. In most suicides, the gun is usually dropped or found in an odd location, not neatly placed in the victim's hand. Ross outright states that from the beginning he suspected foul play. His insights help shift the investigation from a possible suicide to a clear-cut homicide. Jessica's attempts to stage the scene are nothing short of diabolical. She moves Matt's body, trying to make it look like he fell to the floor naturally. The planted bank statement is supposed to suggest some financial despair, a motive for suicide, but her biggest mistake is the gun. Placing it in Matt's hand, she overlooked the fact that someone with a severed brainstem wouldn't have been able to hold on to it. Her lies unravel when confronted with hard evidence. She continues to lie, but eventually the weight of the truth breaks her down. Imagine being part of this investigation, piecing together the horrific puzzle. For Matt's family and friends, this must have been a nightmare that lasted nearly 5 years. The final verdict brought them some closure, but the scars of that night remain. The crime scene details are brutal, and the manipulation by Jessica adds a chilling layer to an already tragic story. It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can turn deadly and how the truth, no matter how well it's buried, eventually comes to light. Let me tell you about the trial of Jessica Lynn Alinsky. It was intense, just like something straight out of a crime drama. Assistant District Attorney Daniel Zola was on fire. He laid out the prosecution's case with such precision that it felt like there was no room for doubt. Zola hammered home the gruesome details of Matt Gailie's murder, focusing on the damning evidence that pointed squarely at Alinsky. He talked about how she tried to stage the scene to look like a suicide, dragging Matt's body from the couch to the floor and planting that bank statement and the gun. It was clear manipulation. Zola didn't stop there. He brought in forensic pathologist Gary Ross, who detailed the bullet's path into Matt's upper lip, severing his brainstem instantly. Ross explained that the way the gun was found in Matt's hand was a huge red flag. In suicides, the gun usually drops somewhere unusual, not neatly placed in the victim's hand. This testimony was crucial in debunking the suicidal theory. But let's not forget the defense. Defense attorney Demetrius Fanek had his work cut out for him. He tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case, but it wasn't easy. Alinsky's multiple conflicting statements to investigators didn't help. Fanek argued that if he'd been able to call Dr. Mark Reynolds, an Australian bloodstain pattern expert, their case would have been stronger. Reynolds had previously questioned the conclusions of Trooper John Corrigan, who testified for the prosecution, but the judge denied the motion for a mistrial based on Reynolds' brief last-minute testimony from an Australian report. Fanek's frustration was palpable. He believed Reynolds could have had a big impact if given more time to review the case details. Now let's talk about the jury. The deliberation took just over 2 hours. Imagine being in that room knowing you're about to decide someone's fate. They only come back to the courtroom once to get clarification on the differences between first and third-degree murder charges and to understand malice. In the end, they found Alinsky guilty of third-degree murder and tampering with evidence. It was a huge moment. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Alinsky sobbed as she was escorted out, realizing she was headed to prison. The reactions were mixed. Zola, representing the prosecution, was relieved and called it a long overdue closure for Matt's family. He said they were overcome with joy and happiness, finally getting the justice they'd been waiting for. Matt's family chose not to comment publicly, but you could tell that they were emotionally drained and relieved. On the defense side, Fanek was disappointed but not entirely surprised. He acknowledged the difficulty of Alinsky testifying given her numerous conflicting statements. As for sentencing, it was scheduled for March 22nd. Alinsky faced up to 42 years in prison. Considering both the murder and evidence tampering charges, Fanek mentioned that Alinsky planned to appeal, which isn't surprising given the circumstances. The trial was a roller coaster of emotions, legal battles, and gruesome revelations. It's a case that sticks with you, showing just how far some people will go to cover up their crimes and how the truth, no matter how well hidden, has a way of coming out. The trial had been this intense roller coaster, right? And then, after all the evidence was laid out and the closing arguments were made, it was time for the jury to decide. There were 12 ordinary people suddenly tasked with making this monumental decision about Jessica Alinsky's fate. They went into the deliberation room, and the weight of the case must have been immense. It took just over 2 hours. Think about that, 2 hours to sift through all the gruesome details and all the conflicting stories and come to a unanimous decision. They only came back to the courtroom once to ask the judge for clarification on the difference between first-degree and third-degree murder and to understand the concept of malice. You could almost feel the tension in the air as everyone waited for their decision. And then the moment came. They returned with a verdict, guilty of third-degree murder and tampering with evidence. The courtroom was electric with a mix of relief and sorrow. Alinsky sobbed as the reality of her conviction sank in. For the prosecution, especially Assistant District Attorney Daniel Zola, it was a long-awaited victory. He expressed grief, saying that Matt Gailie's family finally got the closure they needed. Gailie's family chose to stay silent, but Zola described them as overcome with joy and happiness. On the defense side, you could see the disappointment. Defense attorney Demetrius Fanek knew it was an uphill battle, but he still seemed to think they had a shot. He pointed out that if Dr. Mark Reynolds had had more time to review the case and testify, things might have been different. But in the end, the jury's decision stood. So sentencing was set for March 22nd. With the murder and evidence tampering charges, Alinsky faced up to 42 years in prison. That's a long time to contemplate your actions. And of course, Fanek announced that they plan to appeal. It's a standard move, really, but it showed they weren't giving up without another fight. Now here's where things get even wilder. Like with any high-profile case, conspiracy theories started bubbling up. Some people just couldn't believe that Alinsky acted alone or that the evidence was as straightforward as presented. There were whispers about possible accomplices or deeper motives that weren't explored in the trial. A few theories even suggested that the crime scene was tampered with by someone other than Alinsky to frame her, although these ideas never gained much traction. The public reaction was all over the place. Some were convinced justice was served, while others thought there was more to the story. Social media became a hotbed for these discussions, with armchair detectives dissecting every detail of the trial and speculating on what happened. It's fascinating how a case like this can captivate and divide public opinion. The emotional toll on Matt Gailie's family and friends was immeasurable. Losing someone in such a violent, senseless way leaves scars that never fully heal. The trial might have brought some closure, but it didn't erase the pain. They had to live with the gruesome reality of how Matt was taken from them and the prolonged agony over the nearly 5-year investigation. This case also had a ripple effect on the community and local law enforcement. It highlighted the importance of thorough forensic work and the need for clear protocols in handling and presenting evidence. The way Alinsky manipulated the crime scene was a stark reminder of how easily crucial details can be altered, which likely led to some changes in how similar cases are approached in the future. Even with the verdict, debates and discussions about the case continue. People still talk about whether the right person was convicted and if all angles were thoroughly explored. It's one of the cases that lingers in public consciousness, not just because of its brutality, but also because of the unanswered questions and the human need to understand the truth behind such heinous acts. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.